Good afternoon.
Good evening. Welcome back to Tipsy Casting. I'm Jess, and this is my co-host Jen. Thank you all for tuning in again this week. We are very excited to welcome actor and fellow podcaster, the delightful Audrey Moore, to Tipsy Casting.
Audrey is an actress living and working in Los Angeles. She can be seen in leading and recurring roles on many TV shows, including Better Call Saul, Dopesick, Godless, Dirty John, and many more. She is also the host of the popular podcast, Audrey Helps Actors.
Now grab a cocktail
Or a mocktail.
and enjoy. Hello. We are so excited to welcome the wonderful Audrey Moore of Audrey Helps Actors to Tipsy Casting. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. I've got a half bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. It's 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, but why not? I'm ready.
Strong. Yeah.
You know, I'm really thrilled by the concept. When you told me about it, I was like, yes, are we going to get tipsy and talk about casting? And you were like, we are.
Yes, indeed.
Let's do it.
We are. We've been talking about this for a little bit now. We didn't know it was going to be quite under these circumstances, but
yes.
You know, if there's someone we would like to drink with, it is you. So thank you.
It's so funny that because when I say I'm not a great drinker, I don't mean that like I handle my alcohol poorly. I mean that like I'm just not good at consuming a lot of alcohol. Like I'm a person that gets to a certain point and I'm like, that's good. We're gonna switch. Yeah. We're gonna switch to water, right? But I became like a friend that people wanna like have drinks with. And I was like, and then I'm like, and then I switch to water. It's fine. We're all going to be okay. Everyone's okay.
It'll be perfect. I do love the glass that you have there. That's a real, a little coupe.
Okay, so I want you to know, I brought the glassware out because I'm kind of, this is like my thing, is going to thrift stores and getting vintage glasses. And also, everyone in my family and Jesse's family like dies all the time. And so we inherit it's great. It's fine. It's part of our comedy drama of our life. And so we inherit this is grandma's.
Wow.
And we inherit like all the vintage glassware. And so I was like, what do I want to do today? Like where do I want to?
Which cool glass do you want to give a shot to?
I even put like my water in my favorite cool glasses. This one is particularly weird. Are you ready?
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
What is it? I don't know, but what happened here?
I know, for people who can't see, it almost looks like a bong or something.
Yeah, it looks like a genie lamp. It looks like a lamp because it has like the spout that's like a bong or maybe like a little, almost like a little glass sperm, maybe.
Yeah.
Or
it reminds me of from like The Little Mermaid where he has the pipe that he's like.
Yes. That's exactly
I don't forget he's like snuffing or whatever.
You like drink the wine out of the straw that's a part of the glass. We'll have to like put a link to it because it's so weird, but I'm here for it. You know,
I love it.
Love it.
I like glassware. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to show off some of my girls. That's what I'm here for.
Well, they're beautiful. I cannot say that I'm fancy at all. I've got plasticware.
Well, I do have this is my other vintage. Like I've got my Jedi, like McDonald's Burger King, excuse me, like 1985 Ewok glassware because
those are. It's funny. Yours is glassware. I'm really into fun mugs. Like I buy, people have gifted. I have like a cute little one that has a fox and it says "No fox given." No fox given. It's amazing.
I laughed it out way too hard. Like I'm so basic. I'm like, "No fox given."
It's fantastic.
Well, I'll be the normal one here. I have a regular martini glass today.
Great. Oh, is it an espresso? Today?
Yes. Yep. An espresso martini for me today. Because I don't know if you know, but I'm in London. So I'm drinking appropriately at 7 p.m. at night. So
that's
fantastic. In mind though, so hopefully it's like a breakfast group, but with one.
I love it.
No judgment here. No judgment here.
Yes. I'm doing an iced coffee, and I was just telling Jen I added this lovely thing that I got when I went tequila tasting. It's like a tequila liqueur. Delicious. It has like a butterscotch taste. I'm very happy this morning.
I was almost going to do it, but I had to go wine because I had to show them off. You know what I mean? Yes. Like if I did coffee, I wouldn't be able to
have your cool glassware.
I mean, here we are. But we're going to
yes. But first and foremost, happy belated birthday.
Well, thank you so much.
Happy birthday.
Yay. That was fun. It was a good day. Thank you so much. I was happy.
Yeah, you were on the line celebrating, getting all the hugs.
I was on the picket lines. I asked for birthday hugs and everyone delivered. That was really wonderful. You know, one of the best things about the picket lines right now is all the child actors who are coming out. And that just warms my little heart. Yeah, so many child actors, and a lot of them are fans of the podcast, which is hilarious because my podcast is very explicit. Like, there's a lot of sailor swearing in my podcast, but the kids, apparently, they love it. And so that was great. I got a lot of, like, you know, little junior actor hugs and just a lot of fans that listened and came out. And, you know, one wonderful actor came up to me and said, you know, I went to my first SAG meeting because I listened to the podcast. I was like, oh my God, it's so great. And I gave him a hug. And he was there volunteering that day. It was so wonderful. And he said that he tells everyone to listen to it. And he said, she's out here telling people, you know, maybe you should just quit. And I was like, oh God, that's a reputation I'm getting. Great. And but he said he had to walk away because he got emotional. And I was just like, it's really so moving, and I'm so grateful for the experience of the podcast, the outreach of it, the accessibility that it allows everyone to have to all of our stories, and transparency. And that's what I love about what you're doing. I listened to your episode with Amanda, and I emailed her last night, Amanda Linker Doyle, for those listening. And I emailed her last night and I was like, girl, that episode was so great. I was literally like fist pumping in the car. And I was like, check. I'm just really excited to see the passion and transparency you ladies are bringing to your profession with this podcast in your own right. I think it's so great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited for you.
Well, tell us about you, because, you know, I think we've read you, I've listened to your podcast, but like, tell us how you got going. And then also I want to know what sort of inspired the start of Audrey Helps Actors.
Yeah. You know, I've been an actress since I was, you know, a hobbyist since I was 7, started doing plays when I was a wee little girl. My mom came to see a play that I did when I was 7 and said I was the only person she could hear. And so that was all I needed, was a validation of how loud I am. And a star was born. And then I started, you know, I just got really into it, obviously. And yeah, I'd say by 13, 14, I sort of knew that this was the thing. This was the place for me. And I have always felt really fortunate in that, and that it never felt like, should I do this, or is this where I want to be putting my life? I feel very lucky that my calling and passion has always been very direct and very clear from a very early age. And there was a sense of, I don't know, simplicity to that path, and the focus of that was so clear. And then I went to school. I went to Boston University, and I got a BFA in acting, and I went and studied in London. And I went to Lambda in London, and then I moved to New York City and started some theater companies and founded the Michael Chekhov Theater Company over there. And then I moved to Los Angeles and have been here ever since. And then I guess I'll talk about the podcast. I started the podcast in 2017. because I was angry about a lack of information anywhere between like, where do I get my first headshot, and like, I'm famous, let me tell you about being famous, or this project about being famous. And I was very upset about the lack of communication, I guess maybe generationally, even between actor to actor. And acting is one of those really interesting professions where, I'm not really competing with people 10 years older than me, and I'm not competing with people 10 years younger. And there's not a lot of professions that that's true of. And so it didn't make sense to me that people who were a generation ahead weren't helping, like, weren't telling me what was really going on. And even people within my own sort of age range, but maybe a different casting category, I would get to a level of my career and was just like always surprised, and not necessarily in a good way. I was like, what is this surprise? And they were like, oh, that's just like normal. And I was mad about that. And my husband, the wonderful Jesse Lumen, so handsome, was like, you should do a podcast. And by you, he meant we, unfortunately for him. And Audrey Helps Actors Podcast was born.
I love that. That's incredible. I mean, you're explaining your frustration and your anger, and it is like you're pulling words directly out of our mouths. That's exactly how this got started. Yeah.
That's what I love about listening to your podcast, is it's clear to me that, we're just, I don't know if it's because of an age of access to information, or if it's a generational thing, or I don't know what it is, but I feel that we are tired, as not just our industry, but I think industry in general, period, of cowering, and a lack of transparency, and a lack of camaraderie, and hiding our grievances or even our awarenesses, because we don't want to like upset anyone. And in so doing, I think people are following suit and making changes, making waves.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I think, it's interesting because I've always felt that obviously this industry specifically is very exclusive because it is so hard to break through. But I've always felt that the lack of information and the lack of transparency, or even like intimidation, when you would go and you, as an actor, you take a class and they're like, this is what it's going to be like. The casting director is not going to look at you while you're doing your read. And, like, you have to be okay with this. And this element of it, I think that the burnout ratio is so much higher because people have sort of this glorified expectation when they move to Los Angeles or they move to New York or wherever they go of how quickly things will happen, because you only see the red carpets and the glitz and glamour. You don't see the struggle that you go through. And I feel like if we just shared a little bit across the board, we would make people's journeys so much easier.
Yeah, and I get it in the sense that I think it is a fine line to walk, because there is an awareness that even deciding to pursue this as a profession is in and of itself a privileged place, right? Like the fact that anyone can be in this job and think that that's like a choice that they're going to make, right, is a point of privilege. And so I do really acknowledge that, and I want to be honest with that, and also still say that yes, that is true. And also, though, let's not lie to each other, and let's not then punish ourselves, irrefutably all the time, because we're, lucky to be here and lucky to have that. I feel strongly I can acknowledge the incredible grace and beauty of this profession and the pursuit and the ability to pursue it. while also acknowledging that doesn't mean I have to just eat it all the time. I think I can. I don't think anyone thinks our profession is easy, and so I can also talk about the real things that are maybe logistically not easy and could, in many cases, be made better if we were on the hunt to improve, and not be scared and panicked. And also, it's just an awareness of how the industry runs. Like, the more I got into the success of the industry, and the more showrunners and creatives and DPs and casting directors and everybody that I met, the more I was like, nobody is talking to anyone. And so when I call accounting and I tell them you're not paying me correctly, they are not going to go up to the executive producer that is the person who will remember me and hire me again. Like, they're not going to call them and say, Audrey's upset because I'm underpaying her. Like, that's not occurring, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there is this fear of retribution, honestly, as though things are run well, and things are not run well. There are like 3 productions that are run well, right? And everything else is like kind of permanently on fire. And so you need to get done what you need to get done. And I find you really have to earn, I think, a bad reputation, a difficult reputation.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because I don't think we've ever talked about this on the podcast about how the lack of educated people are, like how little they're educated coming into the industry. Because, and I do think maybe that's where some of all of our problems come from, because a lot of our jobs across the board in production are learn as you go and figure it out and fake it till you make it type aspects, because you do, and you know, especially in indies and places where it's easier to get things made without having the resume to back it up. You walk in and you're just like, you have no idea, producer or director, what you're doing. How did you get this job? Or even I've seen some like development execs who are just like, I mean, do you know what a deal memo is? Like, it's a astounding kind of like thought process. And so when people are like, well, you know, how did this movie get made? And I was like, I don't know. Half the time, I tell actors this all the time in classes. I'm like, as you can be as talented as you can be, sometimes it is just pure dumb luck, because that is just the way our industry is timing and luck half the time. And so it is massively undereducated coming in, because you can go to film school, you can go to acting school, and I don't think anyone can ever say, this is how you can, okay, you want to be this kind of actor, then this is your path you take. You want to be this kind of casting director, this is the path you take. Every story is different, and it's really hard, which is where I think earlier when you were saying like this information that we're giving out and being more transparent about everything is really helpful, because I think the more people who can hear it and be like, oh, it's not just me. Like, I mean, there's so many times I go into meetings that, you know, just last week I was at an event with a bunch of casting directors, and I was like, yeah, it's really slow, you know, especially here, considering the strike affects us, but it doesn't stop us completely. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, everything's just really come to a halt. Everyone's slowing down. I'm like, oh, it's not just me. Okay, great. Good to know. But like, no one shares that information and nobody speaks to each other. So, and it does become very apparent when you have an entire production of 100 and some people, when people don't speak to each other. And I love the accounting instance, because I feel like accounting never knows. It's like you go to them and they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, there's so many times people have been mispaid, actors, casting, whatever. And then I go to them and they're like, I didn't even know this person was working. I do have paperwork on them. And I'm like, wait, what? How are we getting to this point that you don't even know?
But also, to me, like, once I started understanding, like, that is the normal. Like, this now, and I can't speak for 20 years ago, right? I can speak for like right now, where every production is like a flash in the pan, right? They hire one accountant for all of production, right? And like, they don't even have an assistant in accounting. It's like a person who's handling every single actor contract, for which there are like hundreds, right? Plus casting, plus all the ADs, plus, it's just all of it. And so not coming at it from a place of like I'm being gypped or anything like that, but I literally will email them at the beginning of production. I'm like, hey, what's your name? Hey, Margaret. So listen, Margaret, I just wanted to let you know my mom is a CPA. I understand that what you do is really hard and absolutely in the weeds, and I can't even imagine the volume of what you are dealing with because I know it is crazy. Also, I want to make sure that we're in communication because I already didn't get paid for these 3 things. And I just wanted to clarify that I should be getting paid for these things and that that's also what you have because I may be mistaken. But I want to clarify that. And then they're always like, oh, yes, you're right. Those things. And sometimes on rare occasions, they're like, actually, because of this random SAG rule that you didn't know about with this weird thing, blah, 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 we actually don't pay you for that. That's included in this other thing. And that's fine. I can go verify that. It's all fine. But just not taking it personally or seriously or like anyone is a villain or I am a victim, just like realizing it's just chaos. And you either get what you need because you can impinge through the chaos, whether that's a prop or costume or note or lighting or an environment you need to come in that day and do your work or getting paid properly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, it's a tricky thing. I think, we have to have more ownership, I think, over more agency over what we're doing. And it's really hard when we're all, like Jen said, faking it till you make it.
And like it's interesting because like when you were talking, I was like thinking of this story because I always like stories to like help people understand. But I was doing a movie last fall that we had and I use quotations, line producer who I looked her up and I was just like she was an actress and never had line produced anything. And I was like, wait, because she kept coming to me with these really ridiculous requests. And we were shooting in Minnesota and she kept saying, I'm only going to pay you X amount of money because you only need to cast this one lead role. Everyone else will get out of Minnesota. And there was like these massive supporting roles. And I was like, I'm pretty good at knowing where talent comes from and who lives where and things like that. And I was like, and it's not even like we were shooting in Minneapolis, like we were shooting outside. Yeah.
In the middle
and
of nowhere.
Just like, yeah. I was like, so you think you're going to pull local casting for these massive supporting roles for this film? She's like, yep. And so I smartly, because I looked her up and kind of did my due diligence, I said, I'll create a different kind of deal with you where you can pay me per role because I have a feeling that if I do an overall deal on this, I'm going to end up casting the entire movie for like no money. So she's like, yeah. I believe so much that we can find these actors in Minnesota that, yes, no problem. And then it like every week it was like, well, yeah, it was one excuse after another. Like, well, there's this show that's shooting here. So that, these actors, this group of actors, I was like every actor, it becomes now unavailable. Yeah. And so then I ended up casting, I would say probably 80% of the movie when she originally was like, I'm only going to pay you the small amount of money because we only need the one role from LA and everything else. And then, but she never acknowledged that. She kept, like, it's almost like she would go to her grave, like dying on that hill of like, she knew what she was talking about. And like, don't even get me into the deals because we would get into SAG rules and I would have to explain every SAG rule to her. She's like, but I don't want to pay an actor for that. And I was like, you are an actor. Like, how do you know that's not what we're supposed to be paying? Like, it's just, it was one of those times where I was like, I just want to beat my head against the wall at this point. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It really makes me think that we really have to start discussing the difference, and I'm trying to do this more and more in my own seasons, the difference between being a hobbyist and being a professional. And I think that, my husband talked a lot about the writer's strike and that for a lot of these major conglomerates, being in show business is a hobby for them, right? Like they don't need to be in show business, but it's like a cool hobby. And I have no problem with cool hobbies. I have cool hobbies. I always say my mom is like the number one quilter in the Southwest. My mom is an incredible quilter. She wins the state fair every year. She's amazing. She is not trying to make her living off of sewing quilts. She's not interested in it. It's not, but she spends a lot of money and a lot of time and puts a lot of passion into quilting and has an environment and a group and a circle. And I think that's great. But if we are not acknowledging that there is a livelihood that needs to be earned when we're talking about being a professional, and then with that, there should be a resume, experience, understanding, and comprehension of what professional people should be making and how professional people should be treated because they have earned a professional status. I think then you get a lot of people who, through really no fault of their own, are underprepared for the opportunity and assume the professional position that they are not yet qualified for, actually.
Yeah.
Which is a hard.
You couldn't have said it better.
I like hanging out with Jessica. She's just like, I hear her inside snap. I hear her internal snap.
I'm like, preach, girl.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, go ahead.
No.
Sorry, I know I'm a little delayed every now and again. So
no, it's good. I like it. We'll edit the delays. We got this, right?
Yeah. We're getting really good at it, actually. So, I mean, so since you've been in the industry for quite a little bit, what would you say, like, how has it like changed in your opinion for the good, the bad since starting? Like, what changes have you noticed to kind of get us to this point?
I think that the biggest changes that I'm experiencing for myself, but also for people, I think one of the most valuable relationships I have are people who are second generation actors or third generation, right? And they are really living proof of the awareness of how much they are making versus how much their parents were making, and how they are working so much more than their parents were working, and they are getting paid a third of what their parents were getting paid. And that to me is something that needs to currently, and is why everyone's on strike, be addressed. I, like many people, I personally miss the room. I am aware and I acknowledge that that's my opinion. You know, everyone's always really interested in getting me to weigh in on the self-tape versus in-room realities. And it really does feel like 6 in one, half dozen in the other. I was very fortunate that I had begun my self-tape practice in 2014. So I really had put in my hours before 2020 in terms of just getting better at what that is. And while also still auditioning very regularly in the room. So that was my experience. I would say there was a curve in terms of bookings that came about from being in the room to being in the room and moving into self-tape. That was a transition that happened in the pandemic. And I'm not sure how much of that was just more tapes were being asked of people versus I do know that my casting category changed a little bit. I also believe a lot of people in my category quit. A lot of people moved into another industry and moved into another part of their life. So I'm not sure to what degree that contributes to things. And also, I just got better and made more relationships and all of those things. But I do know that there are people who really haven't booked since going on tape, and their ratio in the room was 1 in 3. And I know people who never booked in the room and now on tape are 1 in 3. And I kind of think that 6 in one, half dozen the other. Honestly, it's going to benefit some people in some ways and other people in other ways. I have a lot of feelings about, I wanted to talk about this because I heard on Amanda's episode, I wanted to clarify this. It's for Amanda Langer Doyle, everyone, when she hears, because she had said about the SAG-AFTRA memo coming out about what we were bargaining for. And she had pointed out that we didn't mention casting directors in that we had mentioned producers. And I wanted to clarify that for your group and say, I believe that was a conscious choice. And I actually take a lot of responsibility for that. And I want to clarify why that was. I felt that there was a lot of rhetoric going on in the W&Ws that was like, well, casting, but casting, and casting this and casting that. And I was like, casting does not want to, casting directors do not want to give us 12 hours and 12 pages. I am here to tell you that that is not what's occurring. And so we made, I believe, a very conscious choice to talk about producers and production as like the top of the line where those demands are coming from. And that then casting directors weren't merely needing to do their jobs and fill in what they needed to fill in for producers' demands on schedules and times and volume and all of those things. And so I hope that for people in casting, I hope that you all know that it wasn't at all an intention to disappear you or make you small or make you non-existent. It was actually, the intention was actually to protect you and to make sure that it was clear who was responsible actually for the majority of these issues. That it wasn't because casting wants to fuck us over in time, energy, and money, but that production was putting restrictions, and that was tying the hands of casting directors who then, in order to keep their jobs, felt the pressure to ask for what they needed to ask for because it was coming from above their head.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, please.
So I'm really curious because I get what you're saying and I appreciate that, that it's done out of love, right? Because it's hard sometimes because we do feel very diminished in general, so it is hard. But I guess
rightfully
and so were any casting directors like involved in any way of like, was there any discussion to be like, hey, let's get some input from any kind of casting sense?
Like, what do you need to actually do your job? Yeah.
That's a really great question. I don't know to what, because when we talk, what we're actually talking about, just so everyone listening hears, is called the Working in Wages meetings. And so these are meetings that you go to online, and actors just come and they talk about what's going on. And it's a really inspiring, often crazy process, because people will come with their grievances. And sometimes you're like, well, that grievance is already protected by contract. Please call my office and we will get you your money, or we will protect you from that, right? And oftentimes you'll have a topic for the day, such as self-tapes, and everyone will come with the same grievances, right? And so that's how the union prioritizes our ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just in how that is, casting directors cannot attend those. You have to be a union SAG-AFTRA member, and even if you are a SAG-AFTRA member who is a part of producing in any of these conglomerate ways, even that starts like, you'll get ratted out of like, well, are they going to be, telling the other side what our intentions are? So because of negotiating tactics, it needs to be something that is very internal, and then no one's allowed to talk about it outside. Like, even talking about it now, I feel like a little dinged, like I'm like walking like a tightrope with fire underneath me, right? Because it is a very precious and closed door thing, which is unfortunate that that's just the way it has to be in terms of negotiating tactics, right? But what I will say is the people who attend these meetings regularly, that, I mean, I went to 13 meetings. The people who go, you have to go to 5 in order to get to like the final section where you really hammer out what's going to go forward, right? The people who attend a significant number of meetings, I believe, are people who have relationships with casting directors. They are their friends. They are their spouses. They are, yeah, they are, I've felt and believe real informed advocates. And so I definitely don't believe that the people who are making the decision of what that document actually says, that those people are separated or isolated from the casting perspective. Obviously, they're not casting directors, so it is limited to whatever degree it's limited. But again, I love these conversations because, yeah, that's an important thing. You know, can we, as a union, not even in the W&Ws, but perhaps before they even start, when people are beginning a self-tape committee, can that self-tape committee get together with casting directors and have 2-4 meetings with a group of casting to really discuss from your side what's happening and how we can support you. Yeah. I think that's a really wonderful thing to consider as we go forward.
Yeah, I think it's, and I also appreciate the sort of clarification of where that came from and the intention behind it to protect casting directors from the attack. I think inherently right now, especially, we had the whole Betty May fiasco in March, or I think it was March, and then we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking to Neil Bledsoe about his Variety article about the pay audition stuff. I think there have been so many instances, specifically this year, that have like specifically vilified casting directors, that we are inherently stuck in the middle, whether someone says it out loud or not. And that we just had that the LA Times article that came out on Friday or Thursday or whatever day that was, that didn't say us by name, sort of the way that that document didn't say us by name, but inherently it created, just within our community, of like, you look on our Casting Society Facebook page, or whatever it is, people are so tired of being the bad guy, and we don't know how to show what our struggles are in the process of your struggles, because it is, we talk about it all the time, the trickle down of like what we're facing is a direct impact on actors and how you guys do your business. And so it is the fact that we don't communicate, that is not spoken about transparently in the media, that is creating these clickbait articles. It's really, it's bad, because, and I think a lot of what's in the agreement that you guys are negotiating in terms of being, because Jen and I talk about all the time, we are big advocates about going back in person, but it is, every person thrives in a different environment. So you have to give like this idea of a hybrid. The hybrid existed before the pandemic, so why can't we go back? And so I think this notion that it's just a big disservice to the younger actors that are coming up, because they don't have the ability to have those relationships with us, because they've never met us ever.
Yeah. And, before coming on here, as I was listening to your podcast, I was really thinking about my intention. And in me being on your podcast, who are the people that are going to come on and listen versus the people who are maybe currently listening? And the number of actors that from all markets and all levels who will likely tune into this episode and will hear this perspective. And I really want to say to those actors to please go back and listen to your previous episodes, because I try on the podcast to really talk about, as much as possible, what I know to be true, which is that you are, I mean, I've said it publicly and I think in a way that was hilarious and heartbreaking. I've said that casting directors are like the public school teachers of our industry. I think you are remarkably underpaid. You are spending way too much of your own time, money, and energy without fair compensation to make a difference, to root for people, to get things happening. And yeah, are there bad teachers out there? There are. And there are teachers that are not, who are maybe effective, but nice, maybe is a good way to put it, right? And that's true. That's true of any industry, right? So I think when I was thinking of my intention, I was like, my intention really is for people to understand more holistically what you do as an industry. And I have forever been such a fierce advocate of your craft, because I was taught very early that 90% of directing is casting. I was taught that very early in my craft. And I have seen it be true again and again and again. And I do think that it becomes, the actor is a loud and boisterous, passionate group. And the casting group is not as much, and is also just a smaller number, right? It's just a much smaller number of people. And so I think that can contribute to how you feel about how people are seeing and receiving you. And for whatever it's worth, I do want you to know that professional people that I know in this industry, if we're talking about like reaching a professional status, right? Reaching a level of resume and experience that I believe you can really categorize yourself as a professional. That group of people, I believe, from actors, knows how important the casting director is, knows how hard you are working, knows how much you are sacrificing, and very much knows how poorly you're being treated. And not just actors, but producers know that, independent producers, like people know. And people are scared. I've been thinking so much about that people are scared, and people are in deep grief because people are scared of having the bottom fall out on their life's work. And you are feeling that. Actors are feeling that. And we still have not processed the trauma of a pandemic and its effect on us both emotionally and professionally. And then AI rolls in and is like, hey, come in and take all your jobs, right? And we are scared. And when people are scared, the response of fight, flight, and freeze, and the fight response is an elicit of anger. And I believe that is being directed mostly unfairly towards casting, because they are the face and seem to be the in-between of actors and where actors want to be, and where often we suffer from entitlement or delusional magical thinking about where we should be, and that the casting director is unfairly in the way. And I believe it's misplaced. And I hope that we continue through podcasts like yours and podcasts like mine and whatever other conversations can be had to be more communal in the creative collaboration of understanding all of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very cool. Aspirational, and hopefully in a time where it is possible that we can all support each other during this really difficult time. And, I would really love to talk about it. You are a strike captain for SAG-AFTRA. You are very much on the line basically all the time. Talk to us about what is on the line for these negotiations. What is the most important maybe to you specifically? if you're comfortable saying,
Sure.
I think it's, there's a lot of confusion right now also because these conversations of these interim agreements and how people are feeling about that and what is struck, what is not struck. So tell us what you know.
Yeah, I mean, interim agreements is interesting. I guess the first thing I want to say to everybody is the only hashtag I've been using, and for a reason, is united we bargained and divided we begged. And I really want people to understand that division within the union is the key to destroying any union. That's the key. And I don't think it is mostly malicious on most people's parts. But I wish that I think people again are scared. And so they are fighting and striking out about what they don't know about. And honestly, because they want to know, like they're scared. The interim agreements, my understanding of it is that is how it's supposed to work, that production companies that agree to our terms and sign to our terms are then allowed to create content. And just like I'm allowed to go and do commercials because we have come to an agreement with our commercial contract, that not only am I allowed to do commercials, I am encouraged to do so because those corporations have said we will work with you and we will come to an agreement. And so my understanding is that a tactic that is a valuable tactic is to actually start on the lower rung of the chain of people who cannot afford a strike, companies that cannot afford a strike. And you say to them, will you agree to these terms? And those people say, yes, I will. And then they are allowed to resume production and they're allowed to create content. And then the next person on the rung is like, we are missing out. This company is creating programming, and I really want to take Justine Bateman's cue and not call it content because of the dangerousness. If nobody's listened to Justine Bateman talk about that, I encourage you to look it up. Programming and film and television. And that then you go to the next rung and those people say, okay, well, we agree to your terms. Until finally you're the company left out of not agreeing to those terms. And then you must then agree to those terms because of pattern bargaining. That is a part of the strategy of unions and labor forces. So I think that a lot of people are just not as informed about labor movements, labor strategies, and all of that in general. And that is why I'm so passionate about people going to meetings, because I say, and this is what I have been taught, that a union is only as strong as its active members, meaning the people that are active in knowing what is going on. And it is a very humbling process. A number of times I go to meetings and I think, you know what you need to do, union, is you need to do this thing. And then they're like, well, actually, we did that 5 years ago. And here's the catastrophizing example of what occurred and why we don't do that anymore. Or, you know what we need to do? We need to do this thing. And they're like, well, actually, that really is devastating to child actors and gets into child labor laws. And you're like, hey, characters exist. Fascinating. Okay, interesting. So I think the biggest thing is continuing to, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean,
well, I do want to say thank you for explaining that, because I've seen, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. If not, I'll talk about it now. But like, I think Hollywood is so generally known for like jumping on the bandwagon without reading or being informed of what's happening. And it's like, I see, especially being withdrawn from the LA scene, at least, I see on Instagram, it's just like this constant reposting of the same thing over and over and over again. And people just getting so upset. And like, you know, how many times I get sent things like 5 million times from actors being like, see, look, this.
See, Viola Davis is doing this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and it is one
Yeah.
of those things because even
Yeah.
I had a production that is under $1 million that applied for a waiver,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's
And we
like,
can't call
and
them
people were,
waivers. We don't want to call them waivers.
oh, sorry,
Can
waiver,
I just
sorry,
stop?
interim
Yeah.
Interim.
agreements.
That's right. It's an
Yes,
important distinction. Right.
yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. And so I was reading through the entire agreement because I like
Mm-hmm.
to be informed and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not speaking out of my butt. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like I'm reading through this, and then I had somebody who's quite close to me come to me and be like, this is wrong. Like SAG shouldn't be giving these out. This is hindering the cause, blah, blah, blah. And I said, and
Mm-hmm.
so I explained exactly what you just said, and that
Mm-hmm.
these agreements are actually agreeing to what you want the studios to agree to. So the
To
more
agree
you
to.
can, and they fought me on it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, so I'm grateful that you said that as a strike captain, because I think,
Mm-hmm.
again, especially actors who are very emotionally led in general, they get so excited to be on the bandwagon with something that I'm like, if you read the agreement, we're agreeing to give you everything you're fighting for. So like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you want that to go forward. And that
Mm-hmm.
is how you're going to get things, because so many times I've seen people say like, look, if A24 is agreeing to it, why can't Netflix,
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing. Netflix can. And one of the
Yeah.
things is that Netflix is a part of the AMPTP, and Netflix can go ahead and decide to separate themselves from the AMPTP and come to the table and make the agreement that we are asking for. Any of them are able to do so. And that's something that is
Mhm.
very much on the table as a possibility of how we get out of this thing, right? So what is hard about what you just said, Jen, is that people don't, it's not a quick headline,
Mhm.
discussing, and there's no long, it's like a 2-minute explanation of what pattern bargaining is. That's all. But it's not very exciting. Pattern bargaining is not sexy, right? Like labor laws are not cool, right? So and also everyone remember who runs the media, right? So if the people that own the media that are pushing out these articles about these production companies, that they don't want to make these agreements because then it will push them to have to make these agreements, then of course the very best strategy that they can do is put all these articles on and falsely represent them as being an unfair practice because it benefits the conglomerate to say that it's unfair, because if everyone starts following suit, they're the ones who then have to follow suit as well. So everyone's just like, check your information, check what's happening. And it's hard because, listen, nobody hates reading more than I do. And I say that as honestly as possible. Like, I go to meetings because I am not going to sit there and read a report. I just will not. I will not, right? I have a podcast because I'm not going to sit there and read your article. I'm just not, right? So it is troublesome. And I hope that people just listen, everyone, I just want everyone to just maybe take my word for it that people who invest, I mean, I can't tell you the hundreds of hours to go to meetings, to be on committees, to fight for you, for many of them for decades. The incredibly moving act of service that is involved in that on our behalf. These are not stupid people that want to just absolutely screw us over. That is not what's happening here. And if you're not sure about that, then go to a meeting. And if you do not go to a meeting, then I don't have an answer for you. I don't.
I almost think it should be like, if you don't go to a meeting and you don't inform yourself, stop posting. Just stop posting.
Well,
like,
but
just
that's
stop
about
trying
anything,
to
right?
Yeah, just stop regurgitating
I know.
information. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, that's such an excellent point. And I think it's also sort of the grand scheme of things, and it's a less sort of popular point of, a reference point, is that at the end of the day, yes, the pattern bargaining is like the goal, but somebody needs to be funding your plans. You need contributions for your pension and your health while this is all happening. And if the way to do it is to embrace the non-struck agreements, whether it's interactive, voiceover, like whatever it is, do it. Get in there. If we had that option, like as like casting directors and Teamsters, I'm sure we would all be so grateful for it.
Right. I mean, SAG-AFTRA wants you to make a living. They do. They want you to go earn your health insurance. Go earn your pension this year. Like, please go make money in the contracts where the companies have said, yes, we will agree to your terms. Like, reward those companies and then let people know that those companies are being rewarded with your hard-earned talent and experience that has made you union.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It is a messy time right now.
It is a messy time. I know.
Yeah. Can you really quick, I know we're coming up on our hour here, but could you just kind of explain what are the top points of the strike? That like, what if the AMPTP came back with what top 3 points or whatever you think would be good?
I would say the biggest points that they are discussing right now, number 1 is minimums. Number 2 is streaming residuals. And there's a lot of other ones. I would say, we always have to start at the minimum, right? Mm-hmm. Because the biggest, I would really encourage everyone who's maybe not an actor and listen and not a consistent listener to the Audrey Helps Actors podcast to hopefully go and listen to my episode. It's 20 minutes with Lori Hendler. I'm trying to go point by point and just explain very simply with people who are qualified, like what is going on. And we talk about minimums and how it used to be the minimum was you cannot pay people less than this thing. You can't pay them less than that. You can't treat them worse than this thing. But it was truly just a starting point for negotiations. And that as you both know, with your ears in casting, somebody could come and say, hey, Audrey's been acting for a really long time, and here's all of her credits, and here's her opposite every Emmy winner, Oscar winner on all of her reel. And so Audrey doesn't work for minimums. Audrey gets above minimum. And then a negotiation would take place, right? And now the minimum has become the maximum. And it's truly to ask for more than that is just really take it or leave it. Either you're going to take this minimum or we're going to drop you, right? I love a good animal in the background. And then what happens is if we get into casting, right? If casting directors are also starving and are also being pitted against each other, then I also go, well, how can us as actors expect for casting to then go and yell at production, because their jobs are very much on the line as well, right? And so we have a whole infrastructure of minimums just absolutely screwing people over. So the minimums that we asked for, I believe, is 11%, and what they came back with was 5%. And Lori Hendler, who was SAG-AFTRA since she was 9 years old in the 70s, and was a series regular actress in her early teens, and has worked all the contracts as many actors of that kind of resume do, right? And has worked for minimum, has worked for way above, and seen a career move and change. And she pointed out that the way the minimums are currently scheduled, when you take in consideration inflation and the cost of living, she has gotten, since she joined when she was 9 in 1976, she has gotten a $4 raise.
Wow.
In 40 years. She's gotten
lay it out like that.
a $4 raise. And that's if we get the 11%, right? If we get the 5%, which they are offering, she is now getting a decrease in salary. She's not even just making just cost of inflation. She is now going to be taking a cut on what she earns. And that is unacceptable. It just is. And so when the floor becomes the ceiling, then the floor needs to be something that we can make a living off of. That's just how it is. Yes.
I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
a few years ago, I can't remember exactly which year it was, but a few years ago, there was a new law in the state of California and New York. I don't know if it ended up going anywhere else, but before when we would hire actors, we would ask for quotes, and then we would confirm those quotes, and then you would never go below that quote because that actor has earned that quote.
Right.
A few years ago, it became illegal to ask for quotes.
For the quotes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do we think that, and I know that the intention of it, because it was like to not have
but also maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
Right?
But I'm curious if that ultimately had a negative effect on what we're doing, because it's like you end up, I feel like in my experience when I'm making offers to actors, especially like on indie film or even in TV, really, you end up lowballing the actor because that's what how they set you up from your producers, whether it's a TV or indie film. And then you end up going somewhere else, but you never know if it's actually where it should have been to start.
I don't think so. And here's why. Because you can't ask for quotes, but we can tell you.
Right.
You know, you can come in and say, well, the quote for a one-day guest star is blah, blah, blah. So that's what Audrey's getting paid. And then my agent can say, actually, on such and such show, which she just shot, this is what she got paid. So you're going to need to beat that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's your own network. It may be a branch of your own. It may be a Fox instead of Disney, or Hulu instead of Disney proper, right? Whatever, or maybe a HBO instead of Discovery, or whatever it is, right? But you have the records. You can see that's what she got paid for that role. And so she's going to need to get paid that again. And what we're getting, my understanding is a take it or leave it response. And the thing that the union says, which I really love, is that the union isn't actually just here to protect you against these corporations. Because, you know, when you talk about a mine, nobody wants to work in a mine. Nobody wants to work in the mine, right? So striking against the mine, that's easy. But everyone wants to work as an actor. Everyone wants to work. So the union isn't just there to protect you against your employer. The union is also there to protect you against yourself, and to say you cannot and shall not work for less than this amount, and you will not sacrifice your health and safety because of this job. That your rights are to get paid this amount and to be treated this way so that you are safe and you are taken care of. And that is the value that goes beyond just what I would say a average union does for its worker, which is protect them against the corporation.
So does that include Schedule F, or is that just SAG minimum that is the 11%?
I mean, if we go into Schedule F, Schedule F, it's such a disaster. I mean, do you know what's happening with the packaging of residual income?
Okay. I don't know, in negotiations, what's happening? No.
Yeah.
No, it's really it is so shockingly upsetting. So let's say I'm a series regular on a TV show, and let's say my quote is $40,000 an episode. Now, I know, and I want to acknowledge that to the average person who might be listening to this, $40,000 an episode feels like, well, if you're going to complain about money, you can go fuck yourself. And I understand that. But I also want to say to those of us in the industry who really knows what is happening here, I know that we know that that's not real, right? That there's a lot of gray area that is why that is what it is. And so the quote is $40,000 an episode. And so the corporation comes back and says, we will grant you your $40,000 an episode. And then a year passes by and the actor hasn't received any residual income. The actor calls up and is like, where's my residual income? And it turns out the residual income was baked into the quote. That the quote was actually $20,000, and another $20,000 was actually a prepayment of their residual income.
Wow.
Yes, that's exactly right. What you're